well, I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, you know, guys don't know DoseOfDion. He put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are taking a look at the Detroit Lions needs by position now that we're a week into free agency. Yes, we are a week into free agency, and it's been very impactful, very fun. A lot of news going on, players leaving, players coming in, and it's just been a lot of fun. Some sad moments, some happy moments, a lot of teams making a lot of things happen. We have trades going on, and I thought this would be a great time to update it. It's kind of slow right now, so why not update where the Detroit Lions are by position and talk about whether the Lions have bigger needs, less of needs, or about the same as to before free agency started and to where they are now. So we'll go by each positional group, and then at the end, I'll go through my top 5 needs for the Detroit Lions, you know, based on what they made moves so far. And of course, it's almost April, so that means it's almost draft month. So we really got to know where our holes are for the Detroit Lions. So let's start off with the quarterback position first, and let's just dive right into it. So before free agency started, which was a little over a week ago, okay, so that's how we're doing this. A little over a week ago to where we are now, okay? Is it more or less of a need? A little bit over a week ago, the Detroit Lions quarterback position had a guy in Jared Goff. We already knew that he was going to be the quarterback. You know, it wasn't official. He was still here, so let's just say that. But they had Chase Daniel as a backup. They had David Blau as their third string. Now, Chase Daniel has been cut. Tim Boyle has been brought in for the Packers, and that's the biggest difference to the quarterback position, is that you have a different guy to fight for the backup position with. Instead of it being a older veteran quarterback that you have, and you're like, okay, hey, if something happens to our starter, who we 100% believe in, then he can come in and he can help us out, and, you know, maybe he just kind of doesn't let the ship sink, you know, if our team's good enough, even though our team wasn't that good last season. That's kind of what Chase Daniel was. Boyle, on the other hand, while maybe he can do that, Boyle, much younger, is the guy that's fighting for a role. Like, this guy wants an opportunity. You know, he wants an opportunity to play. Some Packers fans felt like he could have been a future in Green Bay. He's looked incredible throughout the preseason. Even though his college career was bad, he looked incredible throughout the preseason so far up to this point. So for Tim Boyle, even though it's a one-year deal, different from Chase Daniel, who's got a couple years left on his deal, Tim Boyle's younger, and he has the potential to potentially fight for a future spot for the Detroit Lions. And, you know, they only signed him to a one-year deal, but they've never worked with him before, right? There's no connections here. So it does kind of make sense that they wouldn't give him a longer-term deal. Plus, a lot of free agents are only looking for one-year deals. So is this more or less of a need? Well, I have it listed as slightly less of a need. Okay, now let me explain my reasoning. Number one, I think Tim Boyle has an opportunity to fight for a future spot down the road. You know, he has an opportunity to compete. Chase Daniel kind of is what he is, right? He's a backup. He's a veteran backup, right? He's not going to have an opportunity to fight for the starting role. I'm not saying Boyle will get it. I'm just saying Chase Daniel kind of is what he is, right? Now, another big thing here that I'm taking into consideration, because this has happened since free agency has started, is the introductory press conference with Jared Goff. And we have to take this into account, because if you listen how Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes spoke of Jared Goff, they made it pretty clear this is the guy that they believe in. Heck, Brad Holmes pretty much just said it straight up. We're expecting him to be our #1 quarterback for 2021. So to me, I hear that, I'm like, oh, okay, this is their guy. Like, I was expecting that, but this is clearly their guy for at least next season. So right now, I think it's slightly less of a need, slightly less. Now, what could the Lions do? Well, they could definitely take a quarterback early in the draft. Is there someone they love? They could take him. I think that's the one thing right now. It's not a need. You're not in this position where it's like we don't have a quarterback, we have to get one. But if you absolutely love somebody, you're like, we can't miss out, and he falls to you, then you could take him. Or you could be looking late in the draft to UDFA, potentially bringing nobody in because you don't need to. You don't even need to bring another quarterback in. But if you want to, we could late or UDFA for just simply competition for that backup role. But I think it's slightly less of a need. A lot of that has to do with the presser and a little bit of Tim Boyle. You can make the case that it's more of a need because Chase Daniel's gone. He was on a couple-year deal instead of Tim Boyle, who only has 1 year on his deal. But I think it's slightly less, especially after that presser. Then moves on to the running back position. You see these asterisks by the players lost. That basically means they walked in free agency. The Lions didn't cut them, but they walked. And, you know, I'll label those as we go through. But running back position. So we've added Jamal Williams to a 2-year deal out of Green Bay to be our backup running back. And we've also brought back Jason Kabinda, but we still have a guy like Nick Bawden on the roster. We'll see what happens there. Who have we lost? Well, we've lost Adrian Peterson and Kareth White. You probably forgot about Kareth White. 2 running backs here that have both walked in free agency. So the Detroit Lions, is this more or less of a need? To me, it's clear it's less of a need for the Detroit Lions. Lions right now have a strong #1 running back in DeAndre Swift, who they believe in, who Deuce Staley believes that he's a 3-down back. We're good to go there. I love me some Swift. Awesome. Now we got a legitimate #2 running back, which we needed so bad, in Jamal Williams that I'm hyped for. I'm trying to get a Jamal Williams shirt. He's going to be wearing number 30, which means that Okuda is going to likely change his number to number 28 because, you know, Adrian Peterson had that, so he didn't do it. But, man, I'm hyped for Jamal Williams. Now, Kerryon Johnson, I expect him to still be on the roster, but someone that they can develop, you know, and they can use him on certain downs, kind of like they did last year, pass blocking and going out for the pass. What could the Lions add? They could look for a bowling ball type of power back if they wanted to, you know, for like a fourth running back spot if you want to, if you just want to have that. Even though Jamal Williams is really good between the tackles, you could look for a guy that's like 240. You don't really have that back. Or you could go at a scat back, but I don't think you need to because you do have Kerryon, Swift, and Jamal who all catch the ball pretty well. Specifically, Swift and Jamal, they can line up as receivers and make plays in the pass game, especially DeAndre Swift, who's got really nice hands. And also, I could see the Lions cut Nick Bawden soon because they have Kamidna. Or they could cut Kamidna, but one of those. I mean, they don't need two fullbacks. I just included the fullbacks on here because why not? Now let's move on to the offensive line position. Our offensive line from before free agency really kicked off and before we got to, you know, March 15, things like that, and to where it is now, it's very, very similar. I mean, the first five, like if you had to project what the starting five would be for next season, it's still basically intact. And that's either you know, Logan Stenberg or Big V starting right guard, it's still intact. None of that has changed, right? You still have Decker, you still have Jonah, you still have Frank, you still have Big V, you still have Crosby. None of those guys are going anywhere. And you still got Logan, he's not going anywhere. So all of that is basically the same. Depending on who you talk to, someone may say, well, this is one of our biggest needs. We got to go early in the draft to get a lineman. Some people may say it's not that much of a need. We can wait on offensive linemen. It really just depends on who you talk to there. But in terms of, is this a bigger need now than it was when free agency started? I think slightly. Just very, very, very slightly, okay? Very slightly. The reason I say that is because when you look at the depth, we've added Matt Nelson back. Evan Brown was a futures contract, but again, futures contract, keep this in mind, even though I have it listed, that's what the F means. He doesn't mean he failed.
Why? Mrs. Puff, I think I cheated.
It means the future contract. Even though I had that there, this was known before free agency kicked off. So I just put it there, but we've already knew this. So you don't really have to count the futures contracts. And you brought back Dom Muhlbach. But clearly you've lost a little bit of depth in Oday Abushi, Joe Dahl, Russell Bodine. Now I think the reason it's slightly more from this point now to where it was maybe a little over a week ago before free agency officially kicked off is because I think you have a little bit less experience with the depth. Anthony Lynn said it was the deepest position. I think he said on the team, but there is a little bit less depth experience. So I think that's the big difference right now. And that's why it's slightly more of a need. Plus, I think in general, when you have other needs that are higher and they start, you know, becoming less of needs because you start filling them out, those ones that are a little bit lower might start working their way up. So in terms of where we are now from where we are before free agency kicked off, I think it's slightly more of a need because we've lost a little bit of experience and depth. Not to say that, hey, it's not, you know, we don't need to take a top offensive lineman. Some people believe we do, some people believe no. But that's not the point here. The point is that from where we are now, from where before free agency started, is slightly more of a need in my opinion. Not a lot, just very slightly. Move on to the wide receiver position, specifically the outside receiver position, not really the slot spot, outside wide receiver position. We could have put this all in one, but I just, you know. Who have we added? Well, we've added Terrell Williams and Brashad Perriman. Now, again, Victor Bolden, Tom Kenny, those are future deals, so you really don't have to count those. So you can just kind of cut it off. When you take a look at who's lost, Marvin Jones Jr., Kenny Golladay, two big losses there. Now, if I was asked this question, you were like, hey, do you think the receiver position is in a better spot, worse spot than where it was, you know, maybe a little over a week ago before free agency officially started? I would say it's in a better spot. And you'd be like, how? You know, you lost Marvin, you lost Golladay. Well, I was anticipating basically both those happen. I really did not think Marvin was coming back. And then Golladay had a pretty good feeling he wasn't coming back either. So I was anticipating those. But technically, before free agency started, they weren't really gone yet. I mean, they weren't really gone yet. So we did have them walk, which, if we're going by technicalities here, is Terrell Williams and Brashad Perriman an upgrade from Marvin and Golladay? No, it is not. But it does give us 2 one-year deals to help us fill out the roster spots for this season and add some depth. I mean, look, it says need is more because technically it is, because those are not improvements from Marvin and Golladay. But at the same time, I do think it helps the Lions add some depth, and I anticipated kind of both those guys to go. So it's not a big shocker necessarily, I would say here. Now, in terms of potential moves, you could draft a top receiver, or you could just simply add depth, however you look at it. But I look at it like this. Regardless, you got to draft somebody. You got to draft at least one receiver, okay? Because, look, Terrell Williams, I think he's a solid outside threat. He's coming off an injury, though. I think he's a solid outside threat, and you could rock with him next season. Brashad Perriman, same thing. You know, I think he's got some nice upside. He's played well recently. But thing is with Perriman, you know he's going to miss a couple games. Just going by, you know, math and percentages, he's probably going to miss a few games likely. So you're going to need someone else that's going to be able to fill into that role. Behind it, you have Geronimo Allison and Quintez Cephas. Not bad. You have Victor Bolden and Tom Kenny. Not bad, but not great either. You fill these guys out, so it's not like we have to draft a receiver because we don't have any. But you still want pieces for the future. So is it more or less of a need? I think it's more of a need because, of course, you downgraded from Marvin and Galladay. But I expect those guys probably gone. Yes, I did. I think the Lions made some nice fill out here with Terrell Williams, Rashad Perriman. Opens up the draft for them. They can take a receiver when they want, whoever they like. But I still do think you need another outside receiver. So potential moves, you could draft the top one if you really want to go that high, or you could just simply wait a little bit, add some depth, guy that can compete for the outside spot. I think receivers can fall, so you can look at tons of different spots. Plus, UDFA also could be a solid option as well because there's a lot of receivers out there. And that moves us to the slot receiver. Now, I split these up because some interesting points here. We've lost Jamal Agnew and Danny Amendola, and we've added Quintez Cephas. No, we didn't add Quintez Cephas. I'm sorry, I've read that. We didn't add Quintez Cephas, but I expect Quintez Cephas to be our slot. I look at Terrell Williams, Rashad Perriman, both those guys can be outside. That makes Cephas like our Anquan Boldin at slot, which is fine. He can play the slot role, boom, that gives him a role. So we have our slot receiver. But you did lose Jamal and Amendola. And, Cephas still has a lot to prove. Agnew wasn't, a big receiving threat. I mean, you tried to do it last season, but mainly Amendola here. And Amendola was pretty solid for the Lions at that slot receiver position. So, some of this is because Quintez has something to prove. Plus, again, you could use some depth behind him. So, where are we now than where we were before free agency started? I think, again, I anticipated Amendola to probably be gone. Wasn't sure about Agnew. It's slightly more of a need from where we are to where we were a couple weeks ago, but I don't think we're in a bad spot by any means. I think Quintez is going to be a strong, really nice slot receiver that can get a lot of separation. I think it's a perfect spot for him. Don't need to be super fast to play slot, just as Amendola, and he's got really nice size. So I think he's a great slot candidate. But again, I think you got to, look for receivers. So potential, you could again draft a top receiver. You could, look in the draft or the UDFA, or you could sign a cheap, vet, something like that in free agency. That's still available as an option. Just probably not very expensive because you don't have that much money. But I think slot and outside kind of go together, so you kind of mash them together because there's so much versatility. Like Perriman can play slot and all this and that. I think regardless of the receiver, you got to add some depth here at some point. And even if that's not, early in the draft, at some point you got to do it. So that moves us on to tight end. And at tight end, we've added Josh Hill, and we've lost Jesse James. Now, Jesse James was cut. He didn't walk. We cut Jesse James. We added Josh Hill. I think the need is the same, okay? I don't think it's any more, any less. Tight end to me is just not a very big need in general. I just don't see it viewed as that big of a need coming in the offseason, coming into free agency. And once they cut Jesse James, okay, it was slightly a need, slightly. But then we had Josh Hill, and it's like, all right, we're good. We're good. Because with Jesse James, I feel like the biggest thing he brought, look, I wasn't expecting, Anthony Lynn and, to get his tight end super involved because he hasn't done that historically. But what the Lions lost in Jesse James was a pretty solid blocking tight end. So by adding Josh Hill back, you get that back. So there you go. I just don't see a big need here. I don't think the Lions need to even touch the position. I don't even think they need to. But if they did, they could go late or UDFA for depth. I don't think they need to, though, because not only do you have Hill, you have Hawkinson, you have Hunter Bryant, Hunter Thedford, Alize Mack. You still got guys that can compete for spots here. You have a lot of different types of tight ends. So, yes, you could look for depth, but I really don't think you need to do anything with this. So the need is the same. You lost Jesse, you cut him, and you brought in Josh Hill. I think we're perfectly fine. On the defensive line, now let's get that defense side of the ball. Defensive line first. Now, defensive talk is tough because we don't know what scheme we're looking at here. I have a feeling it's going to be a one-gap defensive scheme, but it could be a 3-4. It could be two-gap because that's the background that Aaron Glenn has been with guys like Bill Parcells, which is similar to, how Matt Patricia also learned and how he's building this defense. So it could make sense. It definitely could because guys like Jelani Tavai could fit really well in that defense. But regardless of what scheme we're going to, I didn't think Tavai was going anywhere because he's just too young. Who have we added on the defensive line? We've added Michael Brockers, Romeo Okwara, who we signed, and Charles Harris. Charles Harris kind of like an upside former first-round pick in 2017. I watched the film, wasn't honestly that impressed, but I think there's some upside for a cheap deal there. Who have you lost? You cut Danny Shelton, and Everson Griffin has walked. I don't think he's signed anywhere yet, but he has walked. So in terms of, okay, is this more or less of a need than where it was before free agency started? I see it as less of a need. I think defensive line has gotten really strong. You filled out some really nice spots here. Potential, you could draft a run stuffer or an interior pass rusher. But notice, I don't think it needs to be something that needs to be done early here. I think you're really strong. I think defensive line, arguably, you could make the case is your strongest position right now. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm just being honest here. Yes, you lost Shelton, who was good. He was solid. I would say solid. But you have Pennicini, who I think could take that role if you need a nose tackle. If you go to a 4-3, I still think you have the guys for it. Your depth is there. Michael Brockers, John Pennicini, Jayshon Cornell, Austin Bryant, Julian Okwara, Romeo Okwara, Deshaun Hand, Nick Williams, who you kept around. That's a big part, too. You didn't cut Nick Williams. To me, I think it's less of a need, right? You added some nice pieces, and you really didn't lose too much. I mean, again, I kind of anticipated Everson Griffin to walk. I thought he would sign with Minnesota. Danny Schoen, I wasn't really sure. I was like, will he not? I thought Nick honestly would, but I wasn't sure about Danny, but he got cut. But I think with Penasini, we're okay there. So is it more or less of a need? I think it's a little bit less of a need, which is good because I think this is one of our strongest positional groups on the roster. If you go to a 3-4-2 gap, I think we have the guys that can fill it because they did it last year, right? We already know they can. Who they added can, I think, play that. Even though Harris may thrive a little bit more in a one gap scheme like he talked about. If you go one gap, I definitely think we could thrive because I think Trey Flowers, Romeo, Michael, I think these guys will eat in a one gap. Julian Okwara, I think they'll go off in a one gap. So, yes, I like our defensive line. Linebacker position, this is where scheme comes into play, right? You could say, okay, well, hold up. We're going to two gap. We're playing 3-4, 4-3. How does this fit? Well, if we play two gap, 3-4, great. It's perfect for a guy like Jelani Tavai. But again, like I said, I don't think Jelani Tavai saying is, oh, here's what scheme we're going to, because I didn't think Tavai could really go anywhere. I mean, he's so young. You don't want to get rid of that guy. Unless you find a great trade offer, you don't want to get rid of him. But when you take a look at some of the guys the Lions have added, futures contract Anthony Pittman, so we're not really going to count him. But they did get Jalen Hurts back, who, could just be simply special teams. You also brought back Sean Dion Hamilton. I mean, the thing here is you got guys that can play a one-gap defense and kind of what they were drafted for back in 2017, like Jalen Hurts. Now, you did lose Jared Davis, who was that guy as well for like a 4-3 one-gap. So you're not 100% sure what scheme the Lions are looking at here, but I think regardless, it's a need. Do I think it's more or less of a need right now? I think it's more of a need because, again, it's a futures contract. We cut Christian Jones, and you have Jared Davis walk. He has some potential depending on the defense you go to. I think at a 4-3, one gap, he would have been much better. Sean Dion Hamilton, solid for depth. I think there's potential there. I think he showed us that. Jalen Hurts, I like to see him, kind of get another opportunity, and plus he can help with special teams. But in terms of, okay, are we better or worse, off at this position where we were, just before free agency started? I think we need a little bit more help. I think this is a little bit more of a place that we need. Regardless, I thought it was one of our highest needs. I think I had it as our number one need, and I still think it's even more of a need now because you just need some more depth. But honestly, you need talent. You need depth, but you need top-end talent. And we'll get to this a little bit later when we go through the top 5 potential moves. You could draft the linebacker early. You could add some depth. You could get multiple draft picks. You could look to add core pieces. I mean, there's a lot you could do with this, but it just still needs work regardless of the scheme you try to go to. Let's say hypothetically the Lions go back to a 4-3. Then maybe he gets a shot on the outside again, and probably Jamie Collins would be an outside backer, but then you're looking for that Mike linebacker position, right? You're trying to, test guys out that you can do it. Jelani Tavai would most likely be an outside backer. Be kind of a weird spot for him to be in. I kind of have a feeling it's going to be a 3-4 though. Now, is it 2 gap or 1 gap, right? That's the big difference because it really depends on them what linebackers you're going after. I think it's going to be a 3-4 though next season. So either way, you need help. I mean, it's just simple as that. They need to get help here. On to the outside cornerback position. Again, we're breaking this into 2 just like we do with receiver outside in the slot. Outside, we've added Mike Ford, and then we've lost Desmond Trufant, who we cut, Daryl Roberts, who has walked, Tony McRae, who has walked, Alexander Myers, who has walked. Alexander Myers, the stiff arm guy. Yeah, I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't mean to bring it up. But I will say this. Again, they're walked. They can still be brought back. There's still potential these guys can be signed back. I thought, Daryl Roberts could be someone to sign back. Do I think this is more or less of a need now? I think it's more of a need now because I think simply when you look at it, outside corner, okay, what do we got? We got Mike Ford. Cool. Then what? I don't know. In terms of depth, usually you have 2 outside corners on the field. Amani Okuda, awesome. Ford's your next guy up. Great. You don't have anything behind that. Like, you just don't. It's like, okay, what now? You got to have more depth than that. Lions will have to fill out depth, no question whatsoever. And that could be a, depending on how they feel about Amani Okuda, it could be a higher pick in the draft for outside corner. We'll get to slot in a second. You guys will see what I say about that. But I think outside corner is clearly a need. You just don't have depth there. And again, the Lions are going to have to develop the guys that are already here anyway. So this is clearly a need. They could look for a vet free agency signing if they still want to try and, clear up the cap to do that. Or they could look in the draft. They could do both. I think both could still be on the table. The fact is we saw last season with Trufant, Okuda, Amani, we had all these guys. We thought we had depth. And week 1 is like, oh, Tony McRae's on the field. Okay, we don't have depth. Yeah, you got to have depth at corner. We saw that last season, and the Lions need some outside corner. Slot cornerback, I put Mike Ford on here again because I think he can play both. You lost Justin Coleman. Again, Daryl Roberts was on the last one. You could also put this on that side. Really, again, need more. You gotta get a slot corner because right now, let's be honest with ourselves, Mike Ford could probably play it, but do we have an actual slot? No, we don't have a slot corner right now. Even Jamal's gone. We don't have a slot cornerback on this roster really right now, unless you think Will Harris is could be that guy, could play that position, which he might be able to dabble in a little bit, but not be your main slot. I don't know. Maybe they feel like he can, or Mike Ford possibly. But I think regardless, you gotta have a slot. Whether or not you think those guys can maybe develop, take a role, cool. You gotta have a slot though. We don't have that depth right now. Losing Justin Cole Coleman, letting Darryl Roberts walk. You still got to fill it out. And you can see potential moves. You could draft a starter, which definitely could happen. Earlier pick. Free agency, you can still go look at someone. Adding depth. Anywhere in the draft is open for corner. Corner is a big spot of need, which is honestly not a bad thing, though, outside and slot, because you have Aubrey present, you have Aaron Glenn, these guys that are known to develop these young secondary players. So it's kind of okay to have needs at where their specialties are. You would think you'd rather have it there than somewhere that they really don't know. So there you go. And then finally, defensively, we'll take a look at safety here. As you see, I have Jalen Elliott as a futures contract, but technically we didn't add anybody in this free agency period. That's why it says NA. I just wanted to use that because I thought it looked cool. Could be soon, though. We could sign KZ, who we talked about. I would love to sign KZ. We lost Ron Harmon, who was kind of our ball hawk in the back end, free safety. He walked, and Miles Killebrew, who was more of a special teams guy / linebacker. So you lost a little bit of depth there. So is this more or less a need? It's more of a need, right? You don't have that ball hawk. I think the Lions should definitely go after a ball hawk, and I hope it's KZ or something like that. If not, maybe it's in the draft. But unless you're moving Tracy Walker back to free safety, then then you might have to go get a strong safety. Regardless, I think the Lions could use another safety here. And I think a vet would be really nice because, it'd be kind of cool to have a veteran experience. If we don't do that corner, it'd be kind of nice to have at least one vet, at least that safety or corner in the back end. Just someone that we can say, hey, we know this guy can do his job. Okay, there's not as many question marks about him getting his job done. That's why I think KZ is a great fit. Or, like I said, you could look at three strong safety if you're going to move Tracy Walker back to free safety. Now, this could be draft. If you go to draft, I think it's mid to late. It would make sense if you don't pick one in free agency. I think mid to late makes sense. I don't think just based on who the safety class is, I don't think you go like round 1 draft safety. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe even not even round 2. Maybe like 3 and back would make a lot of sense for the Lions here. Now, they do have some solid depth, I would still say. Even though they lost Miles and Harmon, I still think, with Bobby Price, George, I still think there's solid players here. And, of course, Elliott's a future signing. But I would still like to add another piece to this. So compared to where we were before free agency started, we had Harmon technically and Miles Killebrew. We weren't sure if we were going to bring these guys back or not. No, we didn't. We didn't add anything in replace, so it's a little bit more of a need. And then finally, special teams. We added Dom Muhlbach and Randy Bullock. We lost Jamal Agnew and Matt Prater. So is it more or less of a need? I think it's slightly more because you got to find out who your returner is next season. Guys can do that. Tons of guys can do that. Victor Bolin can do that. So don't think it'd be too hard, but we got to figure out who that is. And I think Randy Bullock, in terms of is he better or worse than Matt Prater? Either way, we're not going to bring in another kicker, but because Matthew Wright is also going to be competition for him. But let's say Randy Bullock gets starting job. As much as I don't think he's as good as a deep kicker, or maybe even much of a clutch kicker, he has the same career field goal percentage as Matt Prater. So, that's your kicker next season. So you did fill out that position. I think it's slightly more because you just got to find a returner. But aside from that, that's it. And then our final slide. So now let me go through my top 5 needs. These are just my opinion, and this is very subject to change as of right now for where I think the Detroit Lions are. My opinions may change on this very soon, but here's what I have right now. All right, let's just get right into it. Coming in at number 5, we have 2 answers. Okay, yeah, I couldn't decide which one I want to put above the other, so I have like 1A, 1B here. So I guess you count one as an honorable mention. You guys can pick. And number 5, I have wide receiver or just receiver in general and offensive line. Okay, I could not decide which one do I want to put at 4, which one should I put at 5. So we're just going to put them both at 5. All right, or 5 or 6. I was going to put them both at 5. So that's what we got. So start off with the receiver position first. I mean, I think when you look at the receiver spots, I think the Lions did a nice job bringing in Terrell and Brashad for some cheap contracts. That way they're not like, hey, we have to take a receiver because there is a need here. But I still think there's definitely room for improvement. Sure, you could get a lot more talent at this position. Also, Terrell Williams, Brashad Perriman, and Geronimo Allison are all 1-year deals. So none of these guys will help you in the future unless, of course, you re-sign them back, which you could, or you could just simply draft guys next year. Like, that makes sense. But if you draft them this year, then you can develop them and be prepared for next season. Plus, I think when you look at a guy like Brashad Perriman and Terrell Williams, both these guys have dealt with injuries. Specifically Perriman, he's going to miss some games just based on the odds of it. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. So you got to be prepared to have other guys step up. I think Cephas can play the slot role, and we'll see what they do behind that. But I think you could definitely add more talent. I don't think this is as talented as it gets. I think there's a reason we paid the money that we did. There can be inconsistencies in these receivers. So I think there are major question marks here still. And of course, you could always have more depth. And I think competition is very important. Make sure you push guys like Brashad. Get the best out of those guys. Don't let them feel comfortable. So because of that, I have receiver at number 5, and I have it tied with offensive line. Okay, I like the offensive line a lot more than a lot of people do. I feel like Big V has a lot of upside at right guard as a run blocker, but right tackle Crosby, even though I think he can do it and he'd be solid, you could look for improvement if you want to. Or you could route with him, and I think you'd be fine with it. Regardless, Terrell does only have 1 year left on his deal, so I do think the Lions will bring in a tackle somewhere. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll be early. It just depends. Our Lions looking to say, hey, do we want to try to go get a starter super early at tackle, or are we saying, okay, let's get someone that can compete for this role, maybe mid-round to late-round tackle, have him compete for the role. If he can't take it this year, maybe he takes it next season. But I think aside from that, it's just about adding maybe some more depth, just add a little more depth. But Logan Stenberg's solid at guard, so maybe you start Big V at right tackle and you're fine. I mean, I like the offensive line. I think there's a lot of potential here with guys that can move around. I think it's pretty solid. But I did get into the top 5 because I really just could not decide which one I thought, I should put here. And keep in mind, when we go by needs, one's at 1 and one's at 3, doesn't necessarily mean that you had to draft who's at the biggest need first. It just means that I think that's a big need. Just depends on how the draft board is. It depends on what players are going to go and how deep the class is. For offensive line, if you're looking for a starter, you're probably looking round 1, trade back round 1, or very early round 2. If you're looking for a guy that compete with Crosby, you could look anytime after that. Tackle's a little bit different than receiver. I think receiver can fall. I think you can weigh the receiver. I don't think you need to go round 1 to get a strong receiver. I think you go 2, 3, 4, and you can get a strong receiver. After that, maybe you're looking for a little bit more developmental, not necessarily your 1 or 2 right away or slot right away, but someone that could get to that level. So it just depends on where you go in the draft. Coming in number 4, then I have the safety position. Now, safety, if the Lions sign KZ this week or someone like that, safety will drop out of this list and we'll just make the normal 5. But right now I have it here because I think safety is a need for the Lions. I think they need a ball hawk in the back end, or if they're going to have Tracy be that guy, then I think they just need another really nice safety that they can rely upon. The Lions don't have veteran experience in the back end. They don't have a safety that can make plays in the back end that we can rely upon and just say, hey, go do your thing. Right now there's just a lot of question marks with a lot of young guys that have struggled recently. And while I do think they can improve and they will develop way better maybe under these new coaches, I think it's always a nice thing to have someone you can just rely upon in the back end. Also help the young guys out. And I think that's what the Lions really need to add here. Now, they could go draft. Say they can't find a deal with somebody and they say, let's just go add one in the draft. That's fine too. I would draft someone that, can play that free safety role that just makes plays in the back end. He's just a playmaker that comes up with tons of picks. So I have it at number 4 right now. And again, if they sign someone, then obviously that will drop out of the list. At number 3, I have the outside cornerback position. We have our top 2, so it's not higher than top 3, but we don't have depth behind it. I mean, Mike Ford is there, but I just know how important it is to have depth at corner. After seeing last season with having Tony McRae out there week 1 and how bad it just really hurt us, and also just knowing that, okay, again, we don't really have a vet at outside corner, and we probably won't add one at this point, but we could. We don't really have one aside from Monty. I mean, look, you just need depth here. I mean, it's just that simple. You need depth, and you got to be deep at corner. It's just so important. So many teams run so many receivers. You have to be able to trust your cornerback group and to go deep. And because there will be injuries, guys will miss time. I don't know what's going on with COVID and stuff like that. So I just know cornerback position is such an important position. But again, it's great that our coaches specialize Aaron Glenn, and Aubrey Pleasant at the cornerback spot because it makes you believe that they could help develop those guys. I already put outside cornerback on here. I think it'd be kind of crazy to put slot at number 1. So putting slot at number 2. Cornerback is just a need in general, and we don't have a slot corner on our roster right now. So adding a slot corner to our roster is vital. Again, you have to have someone that can do that. Looks like it's going to be a draft. Still maybe could sign someone who's probably going to be the draft. You just got to have a slot corner. And, even have guys that can, play the backup slot cornerback position if something happens. You just got to have depth in the cornerback room in general. Okay, that's why they're both 2 and 3. But that brings me to number 1 where I have linebacker. I still think linebacker is probably the one position we just need a lot of help. We need depth, but we also need starters. I mean, we need talent. We just need it. No matter what scheme we go to, whether we say 1 gap, 4-3, 3-4, I think we just need talent and at least get guys to push other players. And I think you could do that in the draft, right? You could be looking at a very young linebacker group that can work with Mark D-Lone, and say, okay, hey, Sean Deon Hamilton, you're going to compete with this guy and this guy. You got all these young guys going at it. Jalen Reeves-Maybin, all these guys that are trying to get opportunities. Jelani Tavai, Jimmy Collins is that 1 vet. You probably won't add another vet. I wish we would have got Anzalone. You probably won't, though. But that's okay. At least, I just know the linebacker position just needs help. I just think it needs work. And I have a little bit more confidence in the cornerback spot. I probably would put slot corner at number 1 because we don't have one. Side corner and slot corner, 1 and 3 would be a lot. Say the Lions go to a 4-3 with the current roster we have, right? Jamie to me would be on the outside, and, so would probably Reeves-Maybin. And Tavai probably would have to play outside. So who's your Mike? You're trying to figure that out. I think it's more likely they play in a 3-4 defense. So I think in the inside linebackers we're trying to figure out, right? Tavai was the inside last year. We know that Jimmy Collins has the versatility to kind of play both. I think you have that edge position like the Jack role filled out in 3-4. I think you have guys like Austin Bryant, Juno Quora, Charles Harris that can do that. But then you're looking for that other linebacker position. I mean, look, they technically could fill it out. They could have Sean Deon Hamilton, Jamie Collins, Jelani Tavai, and let's say Austin Bryant out there. That could be their 4. And that's fine, So if that was the case, okay, I guess slot corner is number 1. But is that the best you could have, right? I mean, there's just a lot of improvement things here. Maybe they go out there, they prove me wrong, proven wrong, and maybe Jalen Reeves-Maybin looks really good, and maybe Sean Deon Hamilton gets a legit role, and maybe Tavai looks so much better, and I really hope that they do. It's just right now, I just think they just need some help. I do think they need some help. But again, doesn't mean it has to be a 7, but it does mean I think they should at least draft 1 linebacker, and it could be multiple. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching.